So the next step, we're gonna be installing the gauges. First thing I gotta do is take the heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun, there's a couple ways to do it. I mean, you can just peel the sticker, however you wanna do it. I'm gonna take a heat gun, heat up the plastic in this sticker, make sure you don't melt it or burn anything, and just peel it off. Now that we've removed the sticker, next steps to drill the holes. I got a 2-inch hole saw here. You can put them wherever you want. The best spot that we found is in the dash here. So now I'm going to use a deburring tool to deburr the holes. If you don't have a deburring tool, you can use a knife, sandpaper, whatever. Now I'm going to install the gauges. What I'm doing now is just tightening the nuts with my hand, trying to get them just as tight as I can with my hand, and that should be good. So now that we got the gauges in there, we're going to put power to the gauges and the water pump. So you want to grab this part of your wiring harness. It's the power accessory part. Pull off this little guy, it makes it a little easier. You're going to get up here to your 12-volt plug-in. You're going to unhook the ground from there. You're going to piggyback it, hook ours up where it was hooked up to the ground on the power source. And don't forget to piggyback that one back into ours, like so. And then these two orange wires will be electrical taped up to this harness. You'll want to take that tape off, and you're going to use one of them to power these. These are hot, they are live. So once we get that in there, we can hook it back into our harness. Hook it into our air fuel gauge. This part will go up to the water pump, and this part's going to go up into our boost gauge. And it doesn't matter which side the red or black go to. So I took the power connector for the water pump. I went through the same padded hole that the loom goes through, which will give it some protection. I'll run it right down the side, down to the bottom where the plug-in's at, and plug her in. Just like all the routing we've been doing, you really want to zip tie everything up, make sure it's tight, it's not going to bounce around and come unplugged. So I'm going to toss a couple zip ties under there, make sure it's all nice and snug and tight. The next step is routing the wires for the air fuel gauge back to the sensor and the exhaust. What you're going to do is just route it right down the coolant lines. Same way, make sure you zip tie it all up nice. This end's going to go back to the sensor end. It's pretty obvious. It's a lot different than the connector at the front. And you're just going to plug her in. So now that I've routed my air fuel gauge wire down with the coolant lines, stay real close to coolant lines, keep it zip tied to them, stay away from the drive shaft. You're going to come up through here. There's a nice little slot here that should give you plenty of room to put the end through the cable. The end of the cable up there, which will go right to our air fuel gauge, and that's where we'll go next and plug her in. So now that we've got her routed, stuffed her up in here, we'll take the wire from the gauge and the wire that we've just routed, plug her in, take her back up there and zip tie her to the frame. Make sure everything's very secure. So now that I've got the wire hooked up to the air fuel gauge and routed to the back of the vehicle, I'm going to take the sensor that will plug into that and mount it up. Run it over here along with the coolant lines and plug it into the harness. Zip tie it all up when you're finished. Now I'm going to install the solenoid valve included in the kit. It comes in a package like this. All you're going to do is zip tie it up to the frame here in between the back seats. So the next step is going to be installing our fuel controller. I'm going to kind of go over what the connectors are real quick here. The blue line, your boost line, is going to go to the boost line off the solenoid. Be a black one that comes and plugs in here. This little tan wire, the plug-in on it, doesn't go anywhere. Don't worry about that guy. This lone wire will go to the solenoid as well and plug into the side. We have a single small black wire. The hoop on the end, that goes to the battery ground. And then all we have left is the 4 injector plugins, which we'll go over a little later. We'll get this routed. So I'm going to drop the fuel controller gently down in the middle here. And I'm going to take the 4 injector plugs and follow the coolant lines back to the back and get them routed. On the injectors, you'll notice there's 4 different plugins. These 2 go to our style injector, which is the bigger injector you installed earlier. They don't matter which side they go to, but when you plug in the factory injector plugins that go to these and only to these, you'll notice they are marked, and it does matter. They're marked MAG and PTO, which is written in the middle of this white sticker. Now what MAG means is magneto side, which happens to be the passenger side on this vehicle. And PTO is power to output, which is the driver's side on this vehicle. So like I said, these sides don't matter. We'll go ahead and plug these in to our injectors. Slide them down on there. Make sure you hear a click. Give it a slight tug. Make sure she's connected completely. We'll go to the other side. Make sure she's connected. Now that we got these 2, I got the one on the passenger side. So I'll find the MAG. It's tagged MAG. So I'll plug that one in. You have to lift up on these little tabs until you hear a click. Grab this one. It says PTO on it, which is the driver's side injector. I'll plug it in. You'll push, it won't click. You'll have to lift up on that until you hear a click. Give her a tug. All good to go. I'll zip tie these out of the way. So I'm going to hook up the boost reference line. As you can see, there's plenty of slack. I'm going to cut some of the slack out of this black line. Main reason is if this gets pinched, you're going to have problems. The most crucial, just like I've been talking about, the coolant lines and the wires getting chafed. Same thing here, but this is the most crucial. When we route any of these boost lines throughout the whole vehicle, make sure that they're not going to get chafed, they're not going to get pinched, they're not going to kink, they're not going to get any holes in them. So I'm going to cut some off just so I don't have so much excess. It's easy as that. Still plenty of length for the guy to pull it out and work on it. Again, this one goes nowhere. We'll zip tie it up here in a little bit. This has a lot of length, not a big deal. We'll wrap it up. I'll plug it in, we'll wrap it up and zip tie it up. So I ran the ground wire along with the coolant lines, came up, there's a little hole right here in the front where you can get in there to the battery area, and I'll hook it right up to the battery ground here. Now we're going to install the pressure line. We're going to start at the IAC and work our way down. It's all pretty well labeled. The next, we'll do the line to the manifold. Then we'll do the line to the blow-off valve. And lastly, we'll end at the solenoid. All right, we're going to start with here. I'm going to route this underneath this part of the frame. Come up in here. We're going to cut this line, go into the IAC, and we're going to cut a little bit of section out so it doesn't get kinked and it's free-flowing. Again, never over tighten the zip tie, especially in the boost line. You don't want this guy to get pinched. So now that you can see we cut into this tube of the IAC, I did cut a little bit of section out of here just so it doesn't kink anywhere. You want this tube to be free flowing, otherwise you'll have a funny idle and it might die on you. So keep that in mind. Now that we got that hooked up, we're gonna go to the next line down the hose, which is line to manifold, which is this guy here. It wraps around and goes into this tube of the chassis. You'll pull it out of there. It's all loose. Take her up. You're gonna cut some length out of it. Give her a good look. Make sure it's all gonna be routed correctly. Cut that extra length out of the cable or the hose. And then hook her up. Just like that. We'll move on down to the next one. The next one's gonna be this guy that says line to blow off valve. The blow off valve's down here. So we'll cut this length and hook it up. So now to the blow off valve. We'll route it down, kind of check your length. You're gonna have to cut some off here. Looks like I'm gonna need to cut off about 6-7 inches or so. Route it down and get her hooked up like so. And lastly, we'll route this along the coolant line that we've routed already down to the solenoid. Follow your, I'll rip this sticker off. You're just gonna follow your coolant line down to the solenoid. That's in the back seat area. So now that we got it routed down here, same as all the others, you know, I'll find the length I want, cut off the excess, and hook her up. Next, we're going to install the K&N air filter in your kit that goes onto the rubber hose that came out of the stock air plenum. I'm going to put a zip tie on to secure the muffler to the hose, and I'm also going to put a zip tie to keep the hose from falling down onto the header pipe. Don't get it too tight. Again, can't kink the hose, want to keep it free flowing. Next step's going to be installing the boost line that goes from our boost box all the way up to the boost gauge. While we're hooking this up, we're also going to take the other line that's hooked up to the box that goes to the controller here. While you're there, look at this. You're going to have to cut some extra length out. Hook that up. It's good to go, and we're back to routing this cable. Same thing, very important not to kink this line or get it to where it's going to be getting chafed, pinched. Again, we're just following the coolant lines. And the other lines, we're going all the way to the front up to the boost gauge. So now that we've routed the boost line along with the coolant line through the center of the chassis, I'm going to go up the coolant line, stay behind it, and through the slot up to the gauge pods. Again, make sure it's clear of all the steering equipment, the A-arms, and the shock. Make sure it's not going to hit the front drive shaft, it's clear of everything, and you got a clean routing to the gauge. When you're happy with the routing, zip tie are all in place. Make sure it's going to stay there. So now I got the end of the boost line up to the gauges. There's a brass nipple on the boost gauge. Slide her on. Now it's time to do the clutching part of the kit. You'll notice that you've been given some clutch stuff by Team in the kit. This is your helix and secondary spring. And then these are the adjustable weights. They came set up for 5 pounds at sea level. That's what this is set up for, so that's what we're going to do. The tools you're going to need is the clutch shock tool that comes with your razor stock. You'll need a 1/8 inch Allen wrench, an open end 3/8 inch wrench, and a pry bar or a flat blade screwdriver. Use a 3/8 inch socket to take off the belt guard, clutch guard. So as you can see, we've taken the clutch cover off using a 3/8 socket on a gun. We've also taken the belt off with the clutch tool provided in your kit. What we're doing in here is we're going to be installing some weights that come in your Aerocharger kit. They come preset up for 5 pounds at sea level with extra weights to add or subtract depending on how much boost you decide to run. Also getting installed on this particular razor is a helix and spring kit. Also offered by Aerocharger, but it doesn't come in the kit. It's an upgrade. This is something for more of the mechanically inclined, someone who has the tools, who's played with their secondary before. Don't be scared if you haven't. You can still take it to your dealer, order this kit, take it into your dealer, he can install it for you. Now we'll install some weights in the primary. So the next step in installing the weights is, this isn't one of the weights I'm gonna install, it's just a spare one I got lying around. It's just, you know, you could use anything, chunk of metal, something that's not gonna crush. You gotta be very careful doing this. You don't wanna pinch your finger. Use a pry bar, be careful and gentle as you can. Slide it in there. You're gonna set the weight in there. There's a spacer. Just like that. Next, we elected to drop the 3/8 of an inch wrench and just use a socket. It's a little quicker. Get in there. Take the nut off. Be careful the stock weight doesn't fall down in there. Put something under it to catch it. And pull the bolt out, slide her up. Now that we've got the stock weight out of there, we're going to insert the adjustable weight. Rotate it over to the next ramp. Now that we have our adjustable weights in there, don't want to forget to take out our spacer. And just like that, added your adjustable weights. All right, we're at the point where we're going to put some antifreeze in the intercooler system. It's nice to have somebody at the back to help bleed the system. I'm just going to start filling it. Once I get some in there, I'll hit the key. You don't have to turn on the motor. Just turn the key on to where it gets power and it'll pump water through the system. We're just trying to get all the air bubbles out of the system. Aerocharger put a petcock on the intercooler. It makes it a lot easier to do. You'll notice the bubbles keep coming up. We're just trying to get all the bubbles out of the system. Once the bubbles stop, that's how you know it's good to go, full of water. Top it off, cycle it through. So we get some air bubbles back there, Matt? Matt will keep opening the valve at the back until he sees no air bubbles and straight fluid coming out of it. Once you think you got all the air bubbles out, shut the key off, put the cap back on, you're good to go. Next, we're going to be installing the intake line that goes from the driver's side air intake to our Donaldson air filter. So as you can see, we've routed our hose. Before I started routing it, you know, the last 2 feet of it, I sprayed a bunch of just random glass cleaner, nothing special. Coated that tube before I slid it in there, made it a lot easier. So now we're going to hook our intake tube up to our intake outlet. We're going to cut it to length. Take some big cutters, something that's capable of cutting the steel rod in here. And then take a razor knife. Slide your clamp on there. Slide her on. The last step is going to be installing the tube. Kit's all installed now. We're going to get her all buttoned back up. I'm going to start up at the front of the vehicle. Your fuel controller is going to be right under this rubber door. Got yourself just enough slack so you can tune her in and it won't bounce around and destroy itself. Next is the taillight assembly. The last piece is going to be the door to the engine compartment.
Well, Calvin, the install turned out really well.
Yeah, it's really simple, you know, just make sure you go through the instructions and watch this video, obviously, and take your time.
If anybody ever runs into an issue, also know that we're always available here to answer any phone calls. But anyhow, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. Hope you found it informative. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, on our website, Aerocharger.com, and look forward to seeing more racing out of Calvin with the Aerocharger team this year with UTVs and snowmobiles.